Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we have an interesting guest, Professor Nathan Kowalsky from St. Joseph's College, University of Alberta, Associate Professor of Philosophy. Welcome.
Thanks.
Philosophy is something we don't hear a lot of. At least I don't, not in the realms, we think about it and you think of Socrates or some other, maybe an old wise man, but You don't have to be an old wise man to be a philosopher.
I'm getting older, but I don't know if I'm getting wiser.
How did you ever get interested in philosophy?
Well, I started out not knowing what it was, and had a best friend whose dad was a philosopher in Medicine Hat, of all places. And I also didn't really fully understand what his dad did for a living. But I wanted to go to university. I wanted to go to Bible school. I wanted to learn how to defend my ideas. And in my case, when I started out, I wanted to defend my faith. And so I was hopefully going to learn how to do that by studying argumentation, which is what a philosopher basically does. Is they articulate what they hope to be convincing arguments and reasons for a position, and also identify non-convincing arguments and reasons and criticize bad arguments. So I got into it for that reason, and then discovered that I loved it. So it wasn't really the plan for my career, because it wasn't likely to be a job for that. But
it's funny where life can take you if you have a passion for something, right? You can create or find your own openings in the world and in life to take you there.
Yep.
So, it's interesting how you were influenced as a young person to be a philosopher and do it for the right reasons, for the things you believe in. But it also comes into play in other things in life. You're also a hunter.
Yes.
How does philosophy ever relate to hunting?
Well, I did not know that it would. So I finished my undergraduate degree in philosophy, and then I went on to do a master's degree in theology. And my supervisor was a tree hugger. He had chained himself to trees on the west coast of BC, and I thought, well, that's hilarious, because I didn't relate to that at all. But then when he started getting me to read some material, I discovered that in environmental philosophy, hunting was a topic of interest, and it wasn't a negative interest either. There was support for hunting from some sides of environmental philosophy. So I was totally blown away by this and shocked and really excited. So I didn't actually intend to be an environmental philosopher until I found out that I could focus on hunting as a topic. So that would have been in my mid-20s, right around the time I was getting married, when I discovered this was a possibility. So arguments in favor of hunting, arguments against hunting, trying to figure out which ones are better than the other, laying out the evidence, laying out the reasoning. That's how I got involved in philosophy of hunting, which is not a thing other than what I do, really, but it's,
right. Yours is tied more to environment and ecology?
Yes, yeah. So that's generally the subfield of philosophy where you can find hunting as a topic. The other place you can find it, which is not a place that I have done much work in, is the philosophy of sport. So whether or not hunting constitutes a sport or what makes it different than other kinds of sports. So you do find philosophers analyzing hunting in that context as well, but not so much for me. So it's mostly for me ecology and environment and conservation.
Yeah, interesting perspective. And understanding more about philosophy and what it is, since we've talked initially, I find myself, what would my arguments be for, and what would people's argument be against? You know, and how does a philosopher deal with that? Like, you're going to have one side of the argument usually.
Well, a philosopher is always going to be somebody with a position and an opinion of their own. So it's not like a philosopher will be the neutral adjudicator between two different sides, but the philosopher is hopefully going to be honest and open about their own commitments and then submit that to critical scrutiny. So one of the scary things about being a philosopher that you have to deal with is that your positions are going to be subject to criticism and critique by other intelligent human beings who are well-trained and everything else. And you just hope that you're able to withstand that criticism and make it defensible. So that can be pretty nerve-wracking. A lot of the times when I prepare a presentation on a topic that I take to a conference for other philosophers, I expect to be excoriated and, pulled apart and criticized and crucified. But if I can somehow survive that, then I've got something worth hanging on to, probably, or hopefully anyway, and then I can build from that. So, but it is a pretty pugilistic discipline. It's like fighting, boxing in a way. In fact, one of my students recently did an honors project on philosophy of boxing and how it was similar in a lot of ways. I'm like, oh, that's not something I thought about, but there's a lot of conflict in philosophy. That's what they do, right? They fight.
Well, I was just going to say, you're going to have thick skin, and you're going to have to like a good debate.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not so much a fight, it's a debate.
Sure. And that's probably a more appropriate metaphor for it. But it's a struggle between two different sides often, and trying to articulate why your position is actually correct, or as opposed to theirs, or more so.
Most people don't realize it, but being on social media can make you a philosopher, because you post a picture of hunting and your friends get in there. Oh, that's great. Where were you? What did you use? Yeah. All these things that are positive about hunting. But then somebody else posts a comment that just slaps you right in the face. How could you do that? And basically that's what philosophy is.
Yeah. Philosophy would be, number one, getting ready for that, of course. And then number two, trying to assess the reasons that one person gives in favor of a thing or one person gives in opposition to a thing, and seeing if those reasons are actually as good as they think they are. Because sometimes people on social media, maybe a lot of the time on social media, people will slap things around but not actually have good sets of reasons and arguments. And so sometimes philosophers will notice how bad somebody's arguments are on social media.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of tells me that it's wise to prepare for some of that. You know, you're going to get that type of feedback, and being prepared, having believable answers to why you do things, credible answers, at least in your arena of the debate, is critical to, I'm going to say, peace of mind, ultimately.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good practice to get yourself aware of why you do what you do and why other people might not think what you do is a good thing, and then to be open to the possibility that they are right and you're wrong, but hopefully not, right? And then to present a set of organized, systematic, hopefully well-substantiated reasons for why you are actually going to be okay if you do what you're doing. And if it can be done in a respectful way, that's the best. One thing that philosophers have classically tried to do is not get too emotional when they're arguing.
It'd make it tough if you did.
Right, yeah. But on the other hand, emotion is one of the things that motivates us, and so we probably have to have emotion in there somewhere. But just screaming at each other isn't likely to lead into a good conclusion. So, so there's that kind of a balance, but there's a kind of virtue of intellect that you have to cultivate in order to be open to both possibly being wrong, but also getting ready to defend and hopefully showing why you're right.
Yeah, and I think that there's different goals. I know as a hunter myself, I'm all often criticized by specific people in our society. How could you do that? You know, I hope you die a mean death the same way. You get all these different comments. But if you look at it from a philosophical point of view, you don't necessarily have to have everyone come in and believe things the way you see it, but you just need them to understand why you do it.
And usually that's the first stage for sure. I mean, you just want people to be able to understand why you do what you do. And if that's all it takes, that's great. Now, sometimes people will think or maybe even come to an understanding of why you do what you do, and then they will claim that now that they understand what you do, they understand also that it's terribly wrong what you do, right? So, but I think a lot of the time, a lot of the resistance to hunting is based on misunderstandings of what hunting is and involves. So clarifying what hunting is and involves really can help, I think, present a case for why it's not as bad as it often is assumed to be. But yeah, there's more to it than that, but that's for sure the starting point, I think, is to get that laid out clearly.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
Tell us what some of your courses' names are. Like you teach a number of different courses, covering a lot of different topics, but give us some examples.
Well, the obvious one is my Philosophy of Hunting course, which is, I think, the only course like it around anywhere. I also teach a class on science, technology, and society. So I get a lot of engineers needing to take that so they can think about their career path. I have a class on the existence of God and evil in the world, and I have a class on moral philosophy and ethics. Sometimes I teach environmental ethics, but I don't often get to because there's other professors at the university who normally teach that. So when they're on leave or something, I can teach it instead. But those are my core classes, the basics there. And then eventually, every once in a while, there's something else that might come up. I teach a class on the good life. Now, that's a new one I just remembered, on how to live the good life. But we don't get to talk about hunting in that one too much.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting because I think the general perception of universities is that you would never have a course there that would promote hunting or not necessarily promote it, but have the opportunity to take a positive view on it. Yeah,
there is probably certain contexts in the university where you wouldn't do that. Universities are fairly diverse places. There's a lot of different departments and faculties, and in one faculty, you might have a whole class on the utilization of wildlife resources, which is basically about hunting for conservation biologists. And another class, somewhere else in the university, might have something that is on veganism and food, and you would probably only talk about hunting in the negative in a class like that. So there will be places in the university where you would probably have difficulty doing something like what I'm doing, but that's normal. There are people in the university who disagree with me. That's normal. I disagree with some people in the university too, but there's enough variety and diversity, and I think freedom of expression and thought for classes like mine to go forward. But even so, right, you were saying it's not about promoting hunting. It's specifically for getting people to think critically about hunting. And
right.
That's something that the students of mine who hunt, I will have to challenge them and make them uncomfortable so that they can think critically about hunting. And I'll have students who don't hunt or who think it's wrong to hunt. And I'll also be challenging those students also to think critically about hunting, and maybe that they need to reconsider their positions as well.
Yeah, and I think any institution for higher education should have those different avenues of critical thinking. But it's interesting that within a course where you have hunting as the obvious topic, that you'd have people sign up for it that are already hunters or that are anti-hunters. You know, you have a very unique audience to talk to.
True. Well, and I think largely that's because it's a controversial topic, right? It's one of those things where if you pick that topic to do a course on it, people are going to be interested in it because either they love it or they think it's horrible, or they're just curious. But if it was something really bland, then maybe nobody would take it. So there's a little bit of marketing that's sort of involved in this, where you're like, this might attract students. Why don't we teach a class on this? It's like, for some time we had a class on Harry Potter because maybe they want to take a class on that. But yeah, but in this case, because it's a hot topic in terms of its moral status, it's controversial enough so that you would expect to have that kind of variety in student backgrounds.
Yeah, it's interesting. How long have you been teaching that course?
Good question, actually. I think it's been close to 10 years or maybe even longer. I should have double checked. I accidentally started teaching the class. It was never a plan of mine. But in 2010, I edited a book on hunting and philosophy. And when I was doing some press for that, one of the interviewers on the radio misunderstood that I was teaching a class on the philosophy of hunting, and then said that I was. I think after they recorded the interview, then some of the narration that they added to it claimed that I had been doing this. So I thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I should teach a class on the philosophy. So probably, well, I mean, it was 15 years ago the book came out. So in the last 10 to 15 years, I've started teaching this course. Yeah,
I think it's awesome. And I think that having critical thinking about hunting from either side of the debate is also important. What's the ultimate goal for the students that come there?
The ultimate goal for my students is for them to have a more informed set of opinions on the value of hunting. And so if they're anti-hunters, they're going to at least be more aware of the positive aspects that could potentially be there, and possibly the weaknesses in some of the criticisms of hunting. For hunters who come to the class, I want them to be aware of some of the problems that could exist with hunting, some of the possible flaws in their own assumptions about it. Personally, of course, I'm a hunter, and so I'm in favor of it in theory, in general. But I should be open to at least reforming certain practices of hunting if they actually are less than ideal or problematic. So really, it's I think a softening of what could be pretty deeply entrenched positions on either side, a willingness to listen to the other's side of things, and then also for them to be able to do a better job of understanding themselves and articulating their own reasons for why they think this or that. And hopefully that's going to lead to a better relationship with your fellow human beings who might disagree with you about something, but you can at least get along perhaps better than before.
Right. It's interesting. We talked when we started, you said philosophy is often a fight. You fight for your side,
yeah.
But it almost sounds like it's more of a respectful debate.
That is the hope. Yeah.
Right.
So I've never felt really that when I go to a philosophy conference or whatever, that I'm not being respected, but it is pretty stressful still having you put a lot of investment into your position and your arguments, and you're hoping that you're right because you want to be. And then to have a whole room of other people maybe argue while you're not, that does feel confrontational, but it's never been really disrespectful. So ultimately that's what I try to do in my class is I'm hoping anyway, cultivating a respectful environment for this kind of debate and discussion to go forward without people getting mean at each other, even though sometimes there's a temptation for that, right? Because people have really closely held beliefs about this.
Right. They get passionate about it,
sure.
And it brings out emotion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a good message for every hunter, because if you hunt and tell people about it, or they know you are, you're going to get challenged at some point in life. Mm-hmm. So having a philosophy about hunting would also include having an understanding of the other side of the debate, which makes you stronger and wiser to deal with them and their argument. So everyone out there, if you're ever challenged by family, friends, or strangers, or social media, to look into your own, you would say it's your own philosophy, sure. Correct? Look into your own philosophy, understand the debate from both sides. It's going to give you a stronger stance and be able to speak to something in a debate and possibly sway someone to understand why you do it.
And part of that is the possibility that you yourself may realize something about your own position that needs to change too.
Right.
Which has happened occasionally to me, I think, although I'd have to struggle now to think of exactly what perhaps as an example of that, but it doesn't matter.
Yep. No, it's interesting. I think it's probably an activity we should all do regularly, just to reacquaint ourselves with why we do this, right?
Yep.
I think it would probably bring more passion to yourself about what you do.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe philosophical thinking isn't for everyone, perhaps, but it is. I think it's quite widespread. I think a lot of people do what they probably what could be considered philosophizing about their own positions. Sometimes I think, what is the claim? Wine makes philosophers of everyone, or something like this. There's some ancient line about just the right amount of alcohol makes a philosopher out of everyone.
Interesting. I could see that.
Yeah, right. Sure. But no, nevertheless, yeah. So I think philosophy is accessible in principle, and it should be accessible in principle to a wide range and maybe everyone. But yeah, it doesn't sound that way initially because it's a highly technical field and there's all sorts of jargon and silliness. So reading it can be a real pain sometimes. But that's kind of what I as a teacher, I do like to encourage my students to consider themselves philosophers, even if they're not going to major in philosophy as their focus in the university, or not going to try to become a philosopher for a career. But to approach life philosophically, I think, is a really good skill to have. And a lot of people probably do without knowing that they have it already.
Oh, I'd have to agree with that. I think a lot of people probably have a philosophy on many different things in life. Sure. And debate it in their own head regularly. Yep. And just don't realize that it's called philosophy.
Yep. Yeah. And then you can learn skills for doing that better, and you can practice it and improve it. So yeah, these are, and that's all what we're doing, I think, is we're taking the basic rules of common sense as logic and then identifying them explicitly, laying them out, and then showing how it would apply to one or another topic. And in this case, we can do that with hunting.
Right. Did you ever expect to have students come in there that weren't hunters, had no influence, no family members, then partake, like become hunters, dive in, do everything required? I don't think that was probably an initial goal, but did you expect it as an outcome?
No, I didn't. I mean, I guess it was always a possibility, but I never thought of it as a thing that I would have expected to happen. But I guess if I was really optimistic about my abilities to convince people that this is a really cool and important opportunity or activity, then I could have hoped that some students might have wanted to, and it has. Like, I have had students who are just interested for whatever reason, but they don't hunt, and they're now thinking about, how could I start or give it a shot or see what it's like. And I've had a couple of students in the past who have gone on to get involved with certain organizations. I can't remember if it was Ducks Unlimited or something else, but they had some mentored hunts, and they were able to just, before class started, they would come back after like a couple of years of having taken my class, and they would give a little presentation, say, hey, by the way, if anyone's interested, there's this guided goose hunt that we can take you on if you'd like. And so there's some opportunities, because a lot of the time, if people are interested in hunting for the first time, they don't have a clue how to start.
No, and there's lots to consider.
Yeah, right.
Right. So,
and a lot of them are going to be urbanites, and so they won't have a lot of land access that sort of maybe comes from living in the country. So, and no familiarity maybe with guns or with bows and arrows and whatnot. So there's a lot of barriers, I think, to entry if you haven't already had a kind of a background or a tradition that would kind of bring you into the hunting activity that way. So, yeah, so I think those students who maybe could become interested in it because of the class, I don't really have a practical component in the course where I'm like, hey, I'll take you outside and we'll go hunting, which, I wish I could, but it's not really something that's within my capacity. So.
Right. It's interesting because I became aware of you after doing a podcast with Fatima Duma.
Right.
Which, she speaks highly of you and your course. It influenced her life in a very positive way. Mm-hmm. She didn't come from a hunting family, had no influence whatsoever, took the course, and, she started off with fish, but it went further, and now, I think it's part of a movement to source organically sourced proteins. And it's the vogue thing to do. Yeah,
it's getting cool, or maybe it's been cool now for a little while. I don't know how long the locavore movement's been around and the foodies and all that sort of thing. It's not entirely my area, but so Fatima, I think she might have taken my class during COVID when it was remote, and it's not a great way to teach. I don't enjoy recording lectures and then just interacting with my students online, but I can't remember though exactly. She took a couple of my classes actually, but yeah, I mean, I think she was an environmental studies student, but interested in food. And then I don't know if the fishing happened first, and then she took my class on hunting. But yeah, she had a really cool story.
Yeah, and it continues to grow.
Yeah. Well, she's the reason why we're talking today, you and I, because she encouraged me, and I think, did she put us in touch?
She did, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a very positive story that's influenced her life, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Can anyone take your course? Do you have to be in environmental studies?
Yeah, well, anyone at the University of Alberta can take it. So you have to be a student at the university to take my class. But once you're a student at the university, anyone can take it as long as their program allows for a credit in the arts. So a philosophy class counts as an arts credit. It's not a fine art, but it's a liberal art, they call it, because you're free to take it. That's what the word liberal literally means, and that has no political connotation there. So if you're a philosophy student, you can take it. If you're a conservation biologist and your biology class degree has room for an arts credit, you can take it. It's an approved program elective in, I think, some of the conservation sciences programs or the environmental studies programs. So anyone can take it, actually, unless they're in a program where all of their courses are given to them by the administration. You have to take all 10 of these courses.
Here's your list.
Yeah, right. And here's your list, and it's not on the list. So there are a few courses like that. Or degrees like that. But if the degree is open-ended, for sure, anyone can take it.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've run into several professors from the University of Alberta now that are hunters that aren't afraid to step up and promote it. You know, Lee Foote taught ecology, and he'd go out and harvest a deer and then have the whole class over in his backyard, and they would dissect it and take different parts out and then have some as a meal afterwards. Like, what a great way to understand it.
I know, right? Lee, I'm sad he's moved away. What I had the opportunity to do before he left was he hosted one of those events for my hunting and philosophy class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In, was it his backyard? Yeah, I can't remember now. And one of the annoying things about philosophy is mostly just words. It's talking. And when you talk about hunting, you're talking about something that's not a lot of words. Especially when you're hunting, you're not doing a lot of talking. You're pretty quiet normally. So here we were talking about all these things that are not normally verbalized, and then had an opportunity to actually have a hands-on experience with that. So some of my students were able to come. It was on a Saturday, right? It was outside of class time.
Yep.
And we had a moose. I mean, it wasn't the whole moose because it had already been quartered and deboned and everything, but we had the moose head, and we had some of the meat, and we had the ovaries and all kinds of different bits that Lee explained what they were for and how they worked and what was inside them. And then we fried up a little bit of them on the fire and ate some, I think some backstrap or whatever it would have been.
Yep.
So there's opportunities like that, depending on what the professor's got, right, to offer. I'm not as good of a hunter as Lee is, so I feel like I wouldn't be able to regularly bring a deer home during the season when I'm there. But there's a lot more hunters at the university than I would have expected, perhaps. But it's really fun getting to meet them and know them and in their different areas that they work in.
It's funny. I'd say that wild game and the actual food part of it is probably an unfair philosophical advantage when you're dealing with people, because if they're open-minded enough to actually try it and eat it, it can be a profound moment for them. Yeah.
Well, I feel like if you accept the idea that eating meat is morally appropriate in the first place, then wild meat may well be the most morally appropriate form of meat. At least it's going to be free range by definition, right? It's going to be organic in a really general sense anyway, unless the deer is eating some contaminated food somewhere, right. I guess. It's going to be cruelty free if the shot was humane and quick, by comparison to some other, I guess there's other ways it could be not, but, and then all the significance that one can find in eating food that you've procured yourself in the wild, from an animal that you respect. That's really profoundly meaningful for sure. And that's philosophically rich.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've had a great discussion. It's been an eye opener for me. I think that lots of hunters out there that get very uncomfortable when they're challenged, because not everyone is an A personality. And if you have somebody come up and challenge you as a hunter, and why would you do that? Why could you do that? I think this is a great talk to have, because it could empower them to actually, line up their ducks in their mind, so to speak, and get their arguments prepared. And not even an argument, but their passion and reasons.
Sure.
Which are arguments, but...
Well, I mean, philosophers use the word argument for this, but it also has a connotation outside of philosophy for a kind of fight, right? And they don't really mean it that way as philosophers, but so what they technically call an argument is just a set of reasons that leads to a conclusion. But I think for hunters that are not looking forward to having a conflict, preparation for a discussion that is honest and open and willing to give is probably going to lead to better outcomes when you are challenged on something than if you just react with instinctual, possibly anger sometimes. A lot of the time, I think when I'm challenged on something and I'm not ready to talk about it, I get mad that someone would dare to suggest otherwise. Or I would just run away or whatever it might be. But it's the Romans studied Greek philosophy because they thought it was a way of preparing their mind for battle.
Very interesting.
Which is not exactly what I'm hoping to say we should do now. But in a way, it's preparing your mind for the inevitability of having a conversation with someone about something that really matters to you that they may disagree with you about, and hopefully doing it in a way that doesn't involve emotional pain, right? Yeah.
I don't know if this would be a term, but philosophical intelligence might tell people when not to enter a debate as well.
Oh, yes, it would. Yes, there's a really, there is a word for that. The Greeks call it phronesis, but it's prudence, funnily, but it's knowing when it's an intellectual virtue of knowing when to engage in a particular discussion or an argument or debate or an activity even, and when not to. And you can be prudent about a whole lot of things, but one of the things you can be prudent about is when I'm going to talk to someone or not, because they may not be in a place where they're willing to listen either, right?
Yeah, and I think we see that more in our lives now with social media,
Yeah.
There are times when you don't want to engage with a keyboard warrior that doesn't have to face you or have other rationale or listen to your side.
Yeah, it's probably easier to do this in person, perhaps over a beer, where we're all going to be philosophers in that sense. Social media does, as a technology, have a tendency to take away a lot of those kind of interpersonal aspects that make discussions between people less likely to be adversarial. And if it just strips it down to a name or a handle and then just words, and there's a lot more, I don't know if it's an incentive maybe, but it facilitates nastiness in a lot of ways, more so than just talking to somebody face to face.
Right. No, I think this is a great talk. Harvest Your Own was started to try to encourage more people to get into hunting. Like maybe one of your students, and they come out of your course, they don't know where to start. They could go to Harvest Your Own. They find out the courses they need to take, the licensing requirements, what types of tools they need to be in the field. But, they're not well versed in it, so their philosophical arguments won't be that strong either, or potentially not that strong.
Sure.
So I think this is a great talk because it provides something for people to think about.
They'll have theory. If they take my class, they'll have theoretical understanding of it, but they won't have actually embodied physical, experiential understanding of it. I think that's really what I want. I think is really what helps is so much of the discussion about hunting does not really understand what it's like. Hunters do, but they may not be sure how to explain that. And then anti-hunters may not understand what it's like. There's a story that I read about, and I have to go and dig up where it was exactly where I found it. I should have done that beforehand, about some anti-hunters who wanted to go on a hunting trip so that they could see how bad it was or whatever it was. And so the hunter was like, sure, you can come along. And they left early because they were so bored. They didn't realize it was such so much waiting and so much walking or whatever it was.
Focus.
Yeah, right. All that. And they were like, oh, really? You just don't run around shooting like things at random and blasting away. So my students who may be interested in hunting, in theory, would benefit for sure for getting out there and experiencing it in person. So actually, I do have a student from a couple of years back now who took my class, and she just now has finally got her PAL and is looking at buying a rifle. And if she's managed to get a rifle by this fall, I might be able to take her out with me. We'll see if that works out. But that doesn't happen that often, but just managed to happen to keep in touch with her. Oh, that's right. Because, she likes eating the heart and the liver. Yeah. And so
interesting.
I brought my heart and livers back and passed them on to her, and she keeps them in the freezer. So
if you were in Africa, it would be the first thing that gets consumed.
Oh, is it?
Always.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And normally it's the heart and liver comes and is taken off to the side, where the skinners and trackers and everyone that has a unique and the best meal of the day, that's what they have.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. I don't mind liver, but heart's not my thing. One of my youngest nephew, or almost my youngest nephew, he loves the heart too. So his dad and him, they eat the heart, but not something I've done. I did try once to take a bite of a raw heart, do the Daenerys Targaryen thing from the Game of Thrones. First time was okay. The second time, not so great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I'd line up for that either.
No.
But, as an instructor, we could call you a referee. And beyond that, you'd probably set the rules of debate.
Yeah.
Do you have some advice for hunters, whether you're, a diehard or just starting out, and they are challenged? What would you suggest they do to prepare for it or deal with it?
I think first I would say get ready to listen before you respond, because I think we can often hear something that wasn't said necessarily because we think that they're talking about it in a way that makes us angry. I find this with myself anyway. So it's hard to do, but it's really important to make sure you understand what the other person really does mean before you respond to that, so that you actually do respond directly to what they're saying instead of a misunderstanding of what they're saying. So be ready to listen. And then if you have to, and this actually, I think, works a lot of the time, is to, before you respond, confirm that you've heard them correctly. So I hear you saying this. Is this correct? Is this what you actually tried to imply by what you said? And if that's the case, then at least you know that you're talking about what they meant. But beyond that, I think preparation would be number one. Can you figure out a way to explain to someone who has never hunted what it's like when you go hunting? and how you feel about it. So you have to also gain a kind of a literacy about yourself, about your experiences, and your own feelings. I think. How do you feel when you're waiting for your prey, or stalking your prey, or how do you feel if you've successfully taken down an animal? What do you do thereafter? So almost itemize your own internal thoughts and feelings about it, and then also itemize the actions that you take. And I think from that, you're going to have the grounding to articulate then maybe some of the values that are underlying those.
Very interesting. I would have never thought to do that, but it's almost like taking a deep breath, controlling your passion, listening to their point of view, ultimately so that they will listen to yours as well, but so that you understand what the debate is.
Yep, for sure.
Very interesting.
Yep.
Well, it's been a joy to have you on the podcast. I've learned a lot. It's broadened my perspective, and I'm sure that there's people out there that are going to be preparing for the debate, because it does make a lot of us uncomfortable. Some of us thrive on it and create a career, but it's learning how to control it.
Yep. Well, thanks. It's been an honor to be on your podcast, and I appreciate that. And hey, I'll come back if you want me.
Sounds great. I appreciate you making the time and sharing these messages through the university and students and our listeners.
You bet.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.